Hi, welcome to Naming Ternary Plus Ionic Compounds. What does ternary mean? Well, remember we did the binary compounds. Bi means two, so binary is two elements. Each of those compounds only had two elements in it. Well, now we're looking at ternary. Ternary means three, so each of these compounds will have three elements in it. And I called it ternary plus because we could have more than three. We could have 4 or 5 elements in the compound depending on the compound. Anyway, in order to have 3 or more elements in a compound, you have to contain polyatomic ions. Remember, we already learned about our polyatomic ions. They're on the back of the periodic table. So, I had already told you that you needed to memorize the ammonium ion as the NH4 plus ion. The other two that I need you to memorize as well are the hydroxide ion and the cyanide ion. The reason for that is because they end in IDE, which is what all of our nonmetals end in. You have to have hydroxide ion and cyanide ion memorized because if you look at a name and you try to write a formula and you're looking at the periodic table for hydroxide or cyanide, you won't find it. It's on the polyatomic ion list, okay? So memorize those three: ammonium ion, hydroxide ion, and cyanide ion. The others actually aren't going to be a big deal. So let's go ahead and name a compound in order to see how this is done. So here I have a compound, NaClO3. You're going to ask yourself the same questions. We asked 2 questions last time. We're going to ask the same 2, but now we're going to put a third one on. So question number 1, is it an ionic or a covalent compound? Well, sodium is a metal. This is an ionic compound. Question number 2, since it's ionic, is this a type 1 or a type 2 metal? Well, sodium, remember, is in group 1. That makes it a type 1 metal. Remember, that means that I do not have to put Roman numerals in the name. I just name my ions. Well, now we have to start asking ourselves a third question as well. So from here on out, you're asking 3 questions. Is it ionic or covalent? If it's ionic, does it have a type 1 or a type 2 metal? And third question, does it contain a polyatomic ion? So, how do you know if it contains a polyatomic ion? This has 1, 2, 3 elements in it. It has to have a polyatomic ion. So, the answer to the third question, yes, there is a polyatomic ion. Well, it's type 1 metal. All I have to do is name the ions. The reason I need to ask this third question is so I know where to look for the name. Sodium ion. Remember, we leave off the word ion. And then we get this ClO3. Well, we already know it's a polyatomic ion, so we go to our chart, find ClO3 right here, look across, and it is called the chlorate ion. Leave off the word ion. And the name of this compound is sodium chlorate. Let's do another one. That wasn't so bad. Okay? So we got COMnO4 2. Remember, all that the parentheses meant was I actually have 2 of the MnO4s. Okay? Let's go ahead and ask ourselves all of our questions. Question number 1, is it an ionic or a covalent compound? Well, cobalt is a metal. This is an ionic compound. Since it's ionic, question number 2, does it contain a type 1 or a type 2 metal? Well, cobalt is not in groups 1, 2, or the stair step. It's a type 2 metal. Remember, that means that I have to figure out what the charge is on the metal, okay, and then put it in Roman numerals. Question number 3, does it contain a polyatomic ion? Well, if you have parentheses in your formula, that is a dead giveaway for a polyatomic ion. So yes, this has a polyatomic ion. Plus we can count our elements. 1, 2, 3. It's got to have a polyatomic ion. So now we know where to look for our names. We also know where to look for our charges, because remember, I can't name this guy until I know the charge. And the charge on it depends on the charge on the ion, the anion. So I have 1 cobalt, some unknown charge. And then I've got 2 of these MnO4s. Well, we look on our polyatomic ion list, and here's MnO4 down here near the bottom, and what you can see is it has a -1 charge. That means overall I have a -2 charge. So cobalt, since I only have 1 of them, must be a +2 in order to balance the charges. Well, now that I know that cobalt's a +2, I can name the compound. So, that metal is cobalt-2 ion, but we leave off ion. And the MnO4, look back at your list again, and you see that it is called permanganate ion. So cobalt-2 permanganate. That is the name of that compound. And that is now naming compounds that contain ionic or polyatomic ions. Be sure and join in the next video where we're actually going to learn how to take our names and write formulas.